Hello and welcome to the final lesson, lesson number 4 on healing the traumatised brain. This course is designed to help you understand how the experience of early trauma in our lives can impact on brain development and psychological well-being, and learn how you can repair your brain and heal from such experiences. Hopefully, you have found the previous 3 lessons interesting and helpful in starting to understand more about how the brain develops during childhood and how it responds to stress, both in typical circumstances and in response to trauma. Hopefully, you are gaining a deeper understanding of the impact of early trauma on brain development and how this corresponds to specific behaviours or experiences that may be faced. And hopefully, you've learnt some ways in which others can be supportive in the recovery from trauma. In this final lesson together, we are going to focus on strategies that can be used by the individual themselves when they experience trauma symptoms, including emotional dysregulation, dissociation, flashbacks, and nightmares. This may be relevant for you personally if you are the individual who has experienced a trauma, or it may be that you are caring for someone or supporting someone who has gone through trauma, and you are looking for ideas to share with them. Either way, it is hoped that you will end this lesson with some practical ideas to take away and start experimenting with. We're going to start with some general strategies to cope when feeling emotionally dysregulated, when outside of that window of tolerance that we've talked about in previous lessons. There are perhaps 3 key things to firstly consider in this respect. So firstly, is it possible to work out what took you outside of your window of tolerance? What were the triggers for this? And if possible, can any of those triggers be managed perhaps differently or even removed altogether? Secondly, in being outside of your window, do you notice whether you've gone into hyperarousal? Are you in your fight-flight response? Or have you gone into hypoarousal? Have you shut down or frozen? This is important to work out if at all possible, as determining this deciphers whether you need to be down-regulated through calming experiences or up-regulated through more alerting experiences. And then finally, is it possible to work out those strategies that work best to get you back into your window? This is something that is different for everyone, so the key is trying to try out different things and find out what works best for you. You might notice that these strategies then work well, not just for re-regulating you, but also broadening your window of tolerance so that actually you're less vulnerable to being taken out of it in the future. So strategies that might work to get you back into your window might include talking and sharing how you're feeling and receiving a response that is non-judgmental, non-evaluative and accepting of the emotional experiences that might be driving your behaviour. It might also include learning how to better notice, understand and communicate your feelings. We also have use of distraction strategies. So these might include those that take up your attention or occupy your thoughts, such as cleaning, walking, gardening, exercise, perhaps hobbies, listening to music, playing games, reading, watching a favourite film or TV programme, or mental games such as counting backwards, or perhaps thinking of as many animals as possible, beginning with, let's say, different letters of the alphabet. There are also sensory activities that can either upregulate you if you're hypoaroused, so things like fast-moving exercise, swinging, spinning, cycling, digging, jumping or bouncing, or downregulate you if you're hyperaroused, so climbing, crawling, chewing, hanging on monkey bars, for example. There are use of relaxation strategies. These might include finding a comfortable, safe place and imagining the individual parts of your body relaxing. It can include maybe imagining the self as a feather or a bubble floating in the air, or focusing on your breathing slowly into the count of 4, holding for 4 and then out for 4. There are use of visualization strategies. You can access separate video demonstrations of both these relaxation and visualization techniques after this lesson. But one example is a safe place exercise, and this encourages you to think of somewhere that's either real or imagined where you feel safe, calm and relaxed. You can then describe that place in as much detail as possible, thinking about all of the different senses, and perhaps associate it with a cue word. So with practice, just thinking of that cue word can then evoke the mental image of this safe place and can help your body to feel relaxed and safe. You can also imagine perhaps placing difficult or overwhelming feelings into an imaginary kind of container of some kind. So something that's strong enough to hold all of those big feelings. You can then think about what it's made of, how big it is, where it's kept, etc. You can also engage in activities that calm the brainstem. That's the primitive area of our brain that promotes survival. These include any activities that involve those patterned, repetitive, rhythmic actions that we talked about in the previous lesson. And ideally, these can occur within the context of a safe and supportive relationship. They include activities like walking, dancing, running, drumming, tapping, singing, breathing, movement, and listening to music. Then we have what we call grounding techniques. These can be used in response specifically to trauma symptoms such as flashbacks and dissociation. And essentially, they are ways of helping your brain to know that it's in the here and now and it's safe. It's not back in the trauma that it thinks it is. Techniques for grounding include sitting in a chair in a posture that feels really strong and really focusing on the contact with that chair and the floor and the sensations that are experienced. It includes mindful walking, where you notice the sensation of the process of walking, contact with the ground, etc. And you can do a similar thing with breathing also. You can think about grounding statements that you can say to yourself that give you an anchor to the present, such as "I am safe now." And you can say these out loud or you can write them down. And you can also find objects that are grounding and hold them or touch them. Again, thinking about the different senses. So how does the object feel? Does it smell nice? Is it representative of something or someone that is safe? Or you can think of 5 things that you can see, 4 things that you can touch, 3 things that you can hear, 2 things that you can smell, and 1 thing that you can taste. You can also do grounding things such as run water over your hands, clap your hands together, stamp your feet or rub your hands together, and just notice the sensations that this creates. Or you can simply think about all the senses. So think about something that's a sound, turn on some music, a smell, perhaps mint, touch, perhaps an ice cube, taste, maybe lemon, or a sight, notice things around you. If you're experiencing flashbacks, there are 10 steps that can be taken to help. The first of those is recognising and naming what's happening. So I'm having a flashback. The second is tell someone else what is happening. And then remind yourself that you're okay and you're safe and that you're just remembering something that happened in the past. The next step is to breathe slowly and focus on that breathing and perhaps do some of those grounding strategies that we just talked about. And then next, reorient yourself to the present. Remind yourself that you're not the child who is unsafe. Once the flashback has hopefully passed, you can then take the time to recover and be kind to yourself. Write down perhaps what happened, if you feel able to, as this might help you to work out what you're still trying to process perhaps, or perhaps still find difficult from the trauma. And then you might be able to identify what might have triggered the flashback and consider whether this can be something that is perhaps managed differently in the future or maybe even avoided altogether. Then you might be able to think about what you may be able to learn from the flashback. Could you do anything differently if it happens again, for example? If you're experiencing nightmares, some of the strategies that might be helpful include finding someone that you can talk to about the nightmare, and perhaps any worries that might be kind of underlying or associated with them. You can think about some of the relaxation or distraction strategies that we've just described previously, including that safe place exercise. Sometimes it's helpful to try and rewrite the nightmare, so think about ways in which you can make it perhaps less distressing or even amusing, and practicing the new script, perhaps even writing it down. The key to the success of many of these strategies is practice. The more you do, the more effective they tend to be. It's also really important to play around with different techniques and strategies until you find the ones that work best for you. Not all of them will work for everyone. Also, feel free to adapt them to suit you. I've given you the sort of basic idea of these strategies, but they can be tweaked to suit your interests or what feels available to you or what feels comfortable to you for you to try out. So that brings us to the end of lesson number 4 of this mini course on healing the traumatised brain. Over the course of the lessons, we have looked at understanding how our brains develop and respond both to everyday stresses and to the more extreme experiences of adversity and trauma. We have learnt about structural, chemical and functional changes that can occur within our brains in response to early life trauma. And we've learnt about the impact these can have, which can be mitigated against if we are offered safe, supportive, accepting and non-judgmental relationships with those around us. We've ended with some practical ideas on what we can do and what others can do around us to support the healing of our traumatised brain. Remember, there are some extra demonstration videos that you can watch to see these in more detail. I would like to end with taking this opportunity to thank you for you joining me on this course. It's not an easy topic to think about, but I hope that it's given you some interesting and some helpful insights, as well as some practical ideas to either help yourself or others following experiences of early life trauma. As is always the case, this course is not designed to replace specialist professional help. If you feel this is needed, this would always be encouraged, either if you or others are struggling with the consequences of exposure to early life trauma. This support can be accessed via an initial conversation with your GP. Thanks again for your time and your interest, and goodbye.